QBOT V3 has a lot of amazing features, and one of the ones that I really like is the Appliqué and Echo feature. As the name implies, the Appliqué and Echo feature is used on appliqué blocks to do the decorative stitching around the appliqué block. So on a Longarm machine, on our quilting frame, we can do that traditional blanket stitch around appliqué items. Also, because the appliqué stitch is not just the one-sided blanket type stitch, we have the ability to do a symmetric stitch. So on the main path of the line, we can go on either side symmetrically, or in a staggered or alternating way, we can do a lot of decorative stitching as well, which is something really kind of new and exclusive to QBOT, and can do some really cool stuff on our quilts now. Now, I've got two examples that I'd like to show you. The first one is a traditional type appliqué, and then the second one is just using the Appliqué and Echo stitch as for decorative purposes. Let's get started. Over here on my frame, I've got something in this yellow fabric. I put down a piece of yellow fabric that's cut in a Ohio star shape, and I put some steam-a-seam on it and put it down onto the quilt top here. And then in the center of that, I put a more detailed dove applique on top of it. And this is just to explain and show the applique feature for QBOT, not necessarily something that you would do on your quilt, although you may. Now here, I've also got a new feature here that we're introducing with the applique stitch, and it is the laser offset for use with an optional precision laser pointer. And I'm going to be choosing my points for this whole demonstration and tutorial using the laser offset. I found that it's really kind of nice not to have to look at the needle point, trying to see through the presser foot, or tilting my head around and getting a crick in my neck trying to get perfect placement. I find that with the precision pointer, it's much easier to get that precision placement. So I'm going to show you how that works as part of the demonstration. And just as I'm choosing points, you may, if you're watching the video closely, you'll notice that I'm not choosing points with the needle anymore. Where is the carriage going? Well, it's because I'm using that laser pointer. If you look through my needle cam here, I'm going to put a piece of paper on there and zoom in. You can see, let's see, it's right over here. I'll have to zoom out. There is a laser dot right there. And that dot is very fine. It's about the width or diameter of the needle point. It's focused very nicely onto the quilt. And it's not so bright that it's hard to actually see where the center is. Sometimes with laser pointers, depending on the spot size and the diameter, because it's what they call coherent light, it's all one single wavelength, it does weird things when you look at it visually. So if you point a laser pointer at a wall, for instance, it's got that fuzzy look to it. We've tuned our laser pointer to be just a little bit dimmer, not so bright, but very focused. So you will see as I'm choosing the points just how nice it is. So from our main menu, we go into the Appliqué Echo routine, and we choose Use Offset, and that means we're going to use the offset feature. We're going to use that laser pointer offset. The first thing it asks us, if you look in the upper left, it says choose the quilting area. And this is just a general area around the appliqué. We have to choose some kind of area because the second part of this routine is the echo portion. And we have the ability to echo to boundary automatically. So we're choosing that boundary. So we have to do it up front at the beginning of the process because we're going to use it later, or potentially use it later. If we don't do any echo stitching, then all you have to do is, at this point, is choose an area that's bigger than the applique. And then when the applique stitching is done, you just say exit and you're done. But if you want to then do an echo and then echo to a boundary, this is what we're choosing right now. We're choosing that boundary. I'm just going to choose around this rectangle here because this is going to turn into a sample that we will show at quilt shows. So I'm going to choose my boundary around this applique piece. And then press done. Now, if you look in the upper left, it says choose applique boundary. It is what it says it is. We're going to choose the points along the applique boundary. Now we have some more choices here. We can choose an open path and a closed path. If we choose an open path, that means we're just doing a line. If we choose a closed path, that means we're going around an object. I suppose you could do an open path all the way around an object and not close it. That's also an option. So open just means it's not connected at the end. Also, look here in our area where we have set point, undo, which is typical. We have those buttons typically in all of the options that we offer pattern quilting, line quilting. Whenever we're setting points, we have set point and undo. But underneath the set point button, we have a new button called an anchor point. And we'll see what an anchor point does, but just in general, an anchor point means it's going to force a stitch at that anchor point. So, you know, when you have appliques and they cut like a star, for instance, where you have star points and then the convex and concave points of the star, if you were doing it on a traditional sewing machine, you would be hesitant as you're sewing it. You know, the sweat starts to build as you come into those corners because you want to make sure that it takes that stitch over right in the corners. Well, QBOT takes care of that automatically. All you have to do is set an anchor point there when you're choosing the points. And I'll show you, actually, I'm going to, at one of the points, I'm not going to choose an anchor point, and then we'll see what happens. And then I'll show you how easy it is to fix it in the QBOT V3 Appliqué Echo routine. So we're ready to choose some points. The first point here, I'm going to be at this corner, and I'm going to choose that as an anchor point. And then just to be, because this is a laser cut applique, I probably could go from point to point at all of the, basically all of the points on this on this applique, because everything's a straight line. It's just going to go from point A to point B. But I like to choose an intermediate point, and just to make sure if there's any waviness at all when I pressed it down, that it's captured. So in the intermediate point, I'm just going to choose as a regular point. So put my carriage, I'll line up my laser dot there and choose that as an intermediate point. Now I'm at the tip, I'm going to choose that as an anchor. Regular point, anchor, and so on. So I'm going to just keep choosing these points. We'll fast forward it here, but I'm using the same procedure all the way through. Okay, I've finished choosing my points and I'm going to press done. And I notice that in one spot in the lower right corner, I chose a regular point instead of an anchor point. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to fix it. We don't have to go back, we don't have to undo. We just use these pointers right here, these arrows that say a left arrow and a right arrow that say 1P, which means you're going to advance 1 point at a time. As soon as you press one of those arrows, the node is highlighted, and you can see as I'm going around, it's highlighting the nodes that I've chosen. So I'm going to go forward, and you see this node right there? It needs to be an anchor node. So what I do is I select it and then press the node swap button, which is the button that has the black square in the pink circle with a slash in between. it toggles between regular point and anchor point. So I've just toggled that back to an anchor point. Now, this has the applique stitching going on the incorrect side, the wrong side. And if you look underneath, we have on the left-hand side, underneath the choices for the stitch width, length, and angle, we have where we're going to change it to the left-hand side. So right now it's on the right. I'm going to put it on the left. And that's what I want. The other thing is, now let's go back to the width and length of the stitch. And we're also going to look at the angle. So the width I've got as 0.09 inches, and the length I've got as 0.12 inches. And those are perfect for this kind of stitching. I looked at samples that we've done in the past and measured them, and that's really an attractive look for this size of block and for this application. And the angle I'm going to leave at 90 degrees. We're going to keep it traditional. So I press done and then move to start. And then we'll pull up our bobbin thread. And press go. And just that easily, we're starting to applique stitch using QBOT V3, of course, on our long arm, which is pretty cool. We're not limited, of course, we're not limited to doing applique stitching on quilts with, or traditional quilts with a quilt top, batting, and backing. You can, on your frame, just have some stabilizer with the top fabric and do all that applique stitching, which was a little bit more difficult to do on a sewing machine. You can have that all laid out beautifully on your long arm and just stitch away as if it's just a regular sewing machine. Okay, so we finished up the applique around that outer block. Pretty amazing, I think, and I think you'll be impressed and really enjoy this feature as well. I'm going to trim the threads and we're going to quilt around the dove. But first, what we're going to do is march through and do a little bit of echo quilting around that block. So let me trim my threads here. That keeps everything nice and tidy on the back. And if you look at our choices on the left-hand side of the screen, it says Save Pattern, Echo, Overlay, or Exit. You can overlay and do a double thickness of the stitches on top of each other. Don't know if you would ever really do that. Maybe in a decorative sense you might, but in a traditional applique, raw edge applique, or even finished edged applique, I don't think you would. But we do want to do an echo around it, and it looks like I want to show you, well, I want to show you the features that we have with the echo, and I'm going to do, looking at what I have available as far as the real estate to quilt, I'm just going to do one echo at about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch away from this block, just to make it pop a little bit. So I'm going to press echo, and there it populates with the defaults, and I'll go from the top down on the left-hand menu. Starting at the top, we can choose the spacing, and right now it's at 1/4 of an inch as the spacing. We then can choose a corner style. Right now it defaults to square corners. We have round corners, and we have mitered corners. And I think for this, because it's kind of a traditional looking block, I'm going to do the mitered corners. Sometimes the rounded corners would look better, and sometimes the squared corners look better. But on this one, I like the look of the mitered corner. You can also see right underneath that we have the choice to do a spiral or concentric echoes. The spiral is one continuous line. It is what it says it does. It just spirals around. And the concentric ones are just that. It does each individual echo as its own unit. So after it quilts the first one, you have to cut your threads. It'll move to the start point of the second one and so forth. It depends on the look that you're going for. And then underneath that, we have the choice to choose the number of echoes we want to do. I want to do just one. So I'm going to say 1 and OK. And I'm also going to choose just one concentric one. So that's what it's going to look like. And it looks like if I tried to do 2, it'd get a little too close to my outer block edge, and it won't look good as a sample in the future. So I'm just going to do this one thing. Just to show you the other buttons, let's see. This button under here, it looks like it's going to echo. It's got an outer edge boundary with an arrow, and it shows the concentric echoes going outward. That's the one button press to echo all the way to the boundary. So we can press that just to see what that will do. And that's what it would look like if we echo to the boundary. Now, it doesn't quilt beyond the boundary. It will trim all of those stitches at the boundary. We also then have a choice, jump stitch the outer boundary. So if you're doing this and then you want to have jump stitches at the outer boundary, which depending on the density of your echoes, I might recommend that, because if you have a lot of echoes hitting the boundary and you don't jump stitch, that means it's going to do a lot of overstitching in the boundary. Now, if it's something that you're going to trim off later, that'll save you some time to just have it all connected. If it's something on a finished quilt that you're not going to trim later, then I would choose the jump stitches and take the time to, it's a little bit laborious, but it'll give better results in the end. You won't end up with this wad of stitching all the way around the boundary. But we don't want to do this. We just want to do just the one, and call it good. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to press done, and we'll move to the start point. Pull up my bobbin and press go. And we'll finish it off by pulling up my bobbin again and trimming the threads. There we go. All right, so at this point I'm going to exit, and we're going to repeat this procedure around that dove inner applique. And what that's going to show is just how precise you can choose points when you go around your applique, and you can get this absolutely perfect. So off to that. Let's get started with that. Okay, again, here, because I'm just going around this center dove, I don't have to choose such a large area, and I might do one echo that's really close to it, maybe 1/8 of an inch, just to offset it, make it pop a little bit, and draw the viewer's attention into it to say, wow, how did they do that? So I'm just going to choose a boundary just a little bit bigger than the dove. Just like that. And now I'm going to choose my points around the dove. Now, I'll get started here, and we'll keep it in regular time so you can see how precisely I'm choosing the points, and then we'll speed it up so that it doesn't, because this takes a little bit of time. This is going to be maybe 5 or 6 minutes of choosing points, and we'll speed it up for you on the video. So here's my first point, and you know what? I think that's going to be an anchor and then I'll just go around very precisely. Another anchor. Okay, I think that looks pretty good, so I'm going to press done and we'll see how it looks on the screen with my defaults. Looks okay. What I'm checking here is to make sure any of the cross stitches don't overlap themselves, and like on very tiny sections, if you have a tiny section like this, that where it's thinner than the overlap, that the stitch won't go over and outside the boundary, then it'll look a little, well, it won't look neat. To put it, I guess, nicely, it'll look a little sloppy. So I might tailor the width so that even in those really tight points, like in the beak of this dove, that the stitches don't go outside the adjacent or the opposite boundary. So let's look at that. And that's up here in this corner. It looks like they're really close up in this area here. And this is a good thing also. Once I'm at this screen, I can use gesturing to zoom in and see how everything looks. So I can change that width to maybe 0.06. Make it very small. Let's zoom in. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. And then let's see, all the other stitches look nice. I don't see anything that needs any drastic change. Everything's really blown up on this screen. You can see it. It's very, I mean, it's very big. So once it stitches out, you won't see all these little what look like imperfections. They're going to look great. So let's press done and move to start. And away we go. This is very delicate stitching. I mean, only 1/16 of an inch is the stitch width on this, and our stitch length between those ladder rungs is 1/8 of an inch. And I would say that you would be hard pressed to do this on a standard sit-down sewing machine with its applique or blanket stitch and getting everything lined up and guiding the fabric through. You would be moving it, probably doing it by hand to make sure that everything is guided correctly. Okay, so we're finished with the applique stitching and it looks beautiful. Looks absolutely beautiful. I'll go through the needle cam here and zoom in. You can see just how precise it is and how nicely done. And the great thing is, all you had to do is choose some points. Let the sewing machine, let QBOT V3, of course, and let the machine frame and QBOT just do all the work for you. Okay, so we're going to do an echo around this. We're going to at least see what it looks like. And I'm going to do rounded corners on this one, I think. And I'm just going to do 1 echo. I'll type in 1/8 of an inch and say OK. And I'll just do 1 and see what that looks like. That looks nice. I think that'll look great. And you can see with the rounded corners how it treats it when it comes into points where where the applique comes into a nice cusp, internal cusp where it's concave. The rounded corners kind of just glide through there and smooth it over. I'll choose mitered corners so you can see the difference. See, a miter, that doesn't look quite right, does it? That doesn't look right at all. So we use a rounded corner there. And a square corner that just doesn't look correct. It doesn't have the same flow as, say, the dove. Okay? But that looks good. I'll press done and we'll move to start. And then we'll press go. Perfect. So that looks perfect. I'm very pleased with it, and I hope you'll be pleased with the Appliqué and Echo routine. Now, I've just shown it on that first example. That was like a traditional applique, something you might quilt or something that you might get in, if you're a business, you get in a customer's quilt and you can do applique stitch around it if the customer would like that. The next thing is to use the Appliqué and Echo stitching as a decorative stitch for something like a crazy quilt or something that's inspired by crazy quilts. I just did a project here that I made some fabric. I laser cut several layers of batik fabric all at the same time and then put them together as a puzzle piece. And then quilted it out with just the applique stitch and echo stitching. And it came out so neat because it gives you the feeling of a crazy quilt, but without all the having to do it by hand certainly. And if you were doing it manually on the Longarm, that would be incredibly difficult. And if you try to match up patterns and something like that and try to do it through pattern quilting, it would be just impossible. But with the Appliqué Echo routine, basically all you have to do is choose your points, choose your stitch size, and press go. So let's do a little example with that technique. I'm going to change my thread to a 12-weight thread that's also variegated in orange, so it'll show up nice on camera and it'll contrast nicely with the fabrics I've chosen as well. And we'll see the effect of using that 12-weight thread with the applique stitch. Hopefully it'll give a nice texture to the quilt. Now, I also say quilt. We also can make fabric that can be used in other things. One of the things that we do around here is we make some bags and purses and stuff like that. And the crosshatch has come in really handy. The crosshatch function or fill quilting has come in handy for some of that, and the applique stitching and echo stitching has really just opened the door on what we can do, because we prepare our fabric first and then we cut it into the sizes that are needed for the pattern, and then construct the bag out of that, and the results are just amazing. Okay, I've got my new thread in there, 12-weight variegated orange thread with nice contrast to the fabrics I've got here. Show you through the needle cam. I've done the same kind of technique. I just had several layers of fabric that I put together and then cut them out along the same line. I used the laser to laser cut them, so all of these lines are nice and precise. but you can do this by hand as well, as long as you keep all the fabric layers together. And then I've used some Steam-A-Seam and put them down to the top layer here. Now I'm going to do decorative stitching around the perimeter and then along these lines, and we'll see what we get. I'll go back into Appliqué Echo, and I am going to choose my outer boundary because I might choose to echo some of this in the future. So I'll just choose my boundary so I know what I'm working to. And now let's choose the first thing I'm going to do is the outer perimeter. So I'm going to choose a bunch of points along the outer perimeter. Now I already know what the stitch I'm going to do. I'm going to have maybe a 1/4 inch stitch length and about 3/8 of an inch stitch width. And I'm going to use the angle, so I'm going to have a 45-degree angle from the main stitch line to the rungs of the ladder or the side stitches, so that it looks like a nice arrow going around the outer perimeter. So that's the stitch that I'm going to choose, so I can decide on how detailed to choose my points around the perimeter. I'll probably use maybe about 1/8 of an inch spacing, maybe just a little more, maybe 3/16 of an inch around the perimeter, because this is a 7-inch circle, so I don't have to be really tight. I also don't want to have too few and make it just, you know, a bunch of straight lines going around. I want it to look like it's stitching in a circle. So somewhere between 1/8 of an inch and 3/16 of an inch will be my distance between the points I choose. And I'm going to use the laser offset, and I'll just get started. Okay, I've chosen my points, and because this is a nice circle, I don't need any anchor points or anything like that, so I'm ready to press done. And let's play with the angles and size. So like I said before, my width, I'm going to do 0.375, 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to do symmetric, putting it on both sides. And I'm going to do a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to have arrows that go around the quilt like that. That should look pretty neat. However, my stitch length needs to be a little bit longer, 1/4 of an inch. That'll look nice. So I'll press done and move to start. Quilting with 12-weight thread is always an adventure, so there might be some restarts around here. Normally what happens with the 12-weight thread is, because it's so thick, there can be problems with the backside tension, because you have the thread going down and then coming up. In between the fabric layer, you have 12-weight thread going down, 12-weight thread coming back up through the same needle hole. And depending on the weight of your bobbin thread, when it tries to pull all of that up, it can get a little bit tricky. So sometimes what you would do is you would use a very fine bobbin thread so that there's enough room for all of those threads to come back up through the hole. Or you increase the tension in the upper thread to make sure that it comes through. On this, I'm just going to let all my settings be where they are. Because it's really not a real quilt, it's just a sample, and folks are only ever really going to look at the front side anyway. There will be the occasional people that want to see what's on the back, but there's a reason with the 12-weight thread why things can get a little bit wonky. But we're just going to give it a go. It's not as if we have 12-weight thread in the bobbin as well, that's next to impossible to get correct all the time. Well, so far so good. That's a good sign. Okay, so we have a thread break, which isn't unexpected. So I'm going to take care of this and we'll get quilting in about 2 seconds. Okay, maybe about 20 seconds. Okay, we grab our bobbin thread and press go. And we're back on our way. I did not choose a tie-off stitch there when I rethreaded, because with this thread, lumping so much weight of thread in one spot would really show up. So I just said, you know, just go, no tie-off stitch. Okay, so that finished up the first outer perimeter. So I'm going to trim the threads and we'll do some decorative stitching on the inside of this circular block. Had only one thread break. That's pretty good with the 12 weight thread. It's sometimes just kind of hit or miss. And today we had a hit, so that's great. So let's look at this interior area here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 seams to do. And I think I'm going to do just some straight stitching here and straight stitching there. And let's do the alternating stitch here and here. So back to applique quilting. And we're not going to do any echoes around this. So we'll just use boundary like that quickly. And we will use, just make sure that we can get all of our stitches in. We sure can. All right, so let's do the straight stitching first. I'm just going to set some points here. Again, I'm using the laser offset. And I'm just going right down this line. Right there, perfect. And I will say done. And oops, I did see how this is a closed path. I need to go back and then say open path and then say done. There, perfect. And I want to do symmetric, and I want this to be, say, 1/4 of an inch on the side, and the spacing to be 1/4 of an inch. And that looks, I think that'll look pretty good. Let's just see if I go back here and make that an anchor stitch. Yeah, we'll get a stitch at the beginning and end too. Perfect. So I'll press done and move to start. And go. Okay, that went pretty well. And let's do that one more time. So we're going to exit, choose our applique, choose an outer boundary, we're going to choose open path this time, right from the beginning, and we'll set our points. Okay, we're set our points, say done, and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. 0.25, 0.25, and symmetric. We'll do a symmetric stitch, and we will cycle through and turn on, make an anchor node there. Okay, and then the last two things we're going to do, last two lines, the last two horizontal wavy lines, we're going to use the alternating stitch and see what that looks like. So we will exit this, go back into our applique, choose an outer area around the first one we want to do, press done. And let's choose our points here. We're going to do open path. Okay. Press done, and then we will change the width to 0.25, and we'll change the length to 0.25. And we will change to alternating. So that looks pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, that looks great. So what we're going to do is press done and move to start. We broke a thread at the end there, and I think we'll leave it like that because trying to fix that and doing all the tie-off, at least for a sample, isn't quite worth it. So I'm going to rethread the machine, and we'll do that final horizontal wavy piece. So we press exit, and then we'll Appliqué Echo again, choose our outer boundary, open path using the offset. Now, one of the things that I want to do along this path, because we're using the alternating stitch, what happens with the alternating stitch at an anchor point? That's a good question. So let's put at this intersection here, we're going to put an anchor point. The answer is, at anchor points and the alternating stitch, when choosing the alternating stitch, the stitch will always go to the right of the path. So I'm moving from left to right here as I'm choosing the path. So the alternating stitch is going to go down into this area down here, down into this orange. That's what happens with the anchor stitch and and the alternating, or the anchor point and the alternating stitch. Okay, done. And you notice I'm changing these each time. If you have a known default stitch length that you like to use, you can put that in the quilting options. Within the quilting options menu, you can put in your stitch width, length, and angle, and that will be the defaults for you. Okay? So I will do alternating, and if I scroll through, you can see at each of the anchor points, which is right there and right there, the stitches are forced to the right, and we chose the path going from left to right. So choosing that means we're driving along the path this way, and as we're driving, the right hand side is down. Okay, let's get going and move to start. Just as this is stitching out, and because it's round, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of baseball pillows and a lot of baseball pillowcases and maybe even some baseball quilts coming around the corner, because with the applique stitch and the correct angle and some white fabric and red thread, you've got baseballs all day long. Okay, let's just look back at what we've done here through the needle cam. We've got that decorative stitching on there, which looks great, and we have this more traditional applique, and it also looks great. The detail and definition of the applique stitch with the echo is just phenomenal with the QBOT. I hope you enjoy that feature, and as always, until next time, happy quilting.